Lucy, I don't have my script on me. Do you remember how we start?
Yes, so you start.
The start that you'll hear on the podcast is hello and welcome to Neuromentoring.
We're so glad you can join us. I'm Lucy.
And I'm Brian.
And together we explore what mentoring is in these neurodiverse places we call universities.
And since we're live, please give us a round of applause. Thank you. So to start off, I've been a mentor now I was working out 14 years. Specialist autism mentoring has been revolutionary in our universities. It's brought around an awful lot of change. The dark days, I think, are in abeyance. It doesn't mean everything is brilliant. But there's been a seismic change in the neurodiversity paradigm, the neurodiversity movement, which is now making universities, I love the word neurocosmopolitan. They're places where minds of all sorts can get together to talk about what it means to be human. So I was a teacher, I sort of fell into mentoring, I've now fallen into research, and I now do a lovely podcast with the lovely Lucy. Lucy, can we ask you next, what is it you do, and tell us a bit more about it?
So I am a mentor, autism mentor, and I also run an organisation with my business partner Amanda, and we provide specialist autism mentoring. We offer quite a bespoke model in that we match our students with our tutors, and our support is completely wrapped around the individual. It's very holistic.
Thank you ever so much. Moving on, Amanda, since you were named.
Hello. Hi, Lucy. Hi. I'm Amanda, Lucy's business partner at Bridge Mentoring. And I came into mentoring probably about 9-10 years ago. Actually started off with study skills specialists for autism and specific learning difficulties, so dyslexia and autism. But prior to that, I worked within the neurodivergent community for 37 years. I worked that out last night, it was a little scary. So 37 years, I started working at an Autism East Midlands school, which was at then North Sarker, in the secondary department, and stayed there for a considerable amount of time. So I've seen quite a lot of change in the understanding, the diagnosis, the presentation. Certainly, it's great now that we have a lot more girls and women being diagnosed. And the last 9 years have been really interesting to get into higher education and see how that's playing out and support people that really, really do benefit.
Moving around the table. Archie.
I believe that, brings you to me.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Archie. I work for the same organisation as Amanda and Lucy. I'm the content and communication guy. And I also do a little bit of mentoring myself, so I like to dip my feet into the transition mentoring specifically is what I'm doing at the moment.
So some of us have been in mentoring for some time. I said, 40 years. Lucy, how many years for you?
5
years. Many years for your good self, so 6 or 7. Archie, how long have you been doing this?
It's about a year.
About a year.
It's something that's been kind of on the other side of my life for a while.
Yes.
I've had a lot of experiences kind of with the systems in place.
Do you want to tell us about them briefly?
I do. So for starters, this for me right now, if you spoke to me 10 years ago, I would have fainted. I would have literally have had a panic attack and collapse. A lot of things have changed for me, and I'd like to say a lot of that is because I had support, but the reality is it would have been quicker had I had support.
Yeah.
I didn't have any kind of full diagnosis until I believe it was 2017, 2018, but it was a misdiagnosis of EUPD, which is known more commonly as borderline personality disorder, which is frankly a nothing diagnosis. I think most people here have probably heard of it, but it's not really something that gets handled very well at all. And it raised questions right away. I only saw a psychologist once, and that kind of was it. There was no review of kind of family history. There was no consideration of my specific circumstances at university, or has there been a change in my life?
So what happened at university?
I was at university 2 years longer than I should have been. One of the reasons why is I got kind of caught in a bit of a structural loop, and I I feel bad admitting this, but I found what to me felt like a suitable loophole, and this just shows you the coping mechanisms I went to here. Is I was struggling so much with kind of feeling like I was keeping up with everything that I opted to fail a core module, and by doing so, I passed everything else, but I opted to fail one, kind of, believe it or not, with the non-written consent of all my lecturers to give me another year of funding to then go carry on.
Yeah, you're not alone. I've had two students who've done something very
okay.
similar. There is that thing that the 4-year university, 3-year university, but the 4-year funding doesn't work for all. And that's why I'm so glad that Archie has come to join us, because sometimes when we talk about mentoring, we can polish it, we talk about the success. Actually, there are struggles there.
Yeah.
And those that have struggled sometimes become brilliant mentors in their own right. Hopefully.
Fingers crossed. We'll see.
Thank you. That's where we've come from. We're now opening this space for you to bombard us with questions. There might be one or two of you that might have something that's been sitting with you. We have one from the front. If you want to, you can say your name. It's entirely up to you.
Oh, I don't know now. So I'm Louise. I work at Oxford Brookes. I work in art and design, and I'm interested in how specialist autism mentoring can intersect with university's provision around academic advising.
Yeah. I know that I've got very different experience from this group at Bridge.
Yeah.
So Lucy, do you want to kick off with that one?
I have found that with different universities it varies to different degrees, but as part of our holistic model, if there's somebody on campus that is also supporting one of your mentees, if the student wants it, absolutely work together.
I think if I could add to Lucy's point there, I think it's always very interesting when you work across different universities, the different approaches, and where in some instances universities are quite open to come on and work with us and talk and help and you know, join that holistic circle of support. There are occasions when it's actually you feel quite alienated, because sometimes I think, and I think this is something we've perhaps touched on when we spoke earlier, as an external provider, I sometimes feel like, oh, we're seen as a bit of a, who are you and where are you from? When actually all we really want to do is say, come on, let's get this sorted and let's all work together and get the best for the student, because ultimately the goal is to bring the student to get the maximum out of their education to achieve to the best of their possible ability. It's sometimes very difficult to align the expectations, and sometimes within the role of a mentor, you know, it's difficult to know how far do we go to in that role of advocacy, which we're not really advocates. You know, we try and encourage advocacy with the student for them to support that, but sometimes the student needs us just to be there, just to know that we're there, and they've got somebody who really understands the nature of what they've been going through in that mentor-mentee relationship. I don't know if that answers your question.
That fomenting of advocacy, I think, is core of the mentors. I nearly said fomenting of anarchy. That is a very Brian thing. But there is something about you cannot become an advocate if you don't know how to advocate for yourself. And we know that students that self-advocate, one of the work that I was listening to earlier was talking about actually students who self-advocate have better outcomes in terms both of mental health and of student outcomes. But how do you learn to self-advocate if you've got nobody around to do that interface? And that's why I think groups like Bridge are really important, because they can stand on, they can bridge. Is that why you're called Bridge? I am such a numpty. They bridge the gap between the stuff that's needed and the stuff that the university can do. Now, my experience was slightly different. So I was employed by a university for 10 years as an in-house mentor. The funding came through the same model, it's just the university had taken the chance to set itself up as a provider. So I suppose I would be shackled a little bit more by contracts and all that kind of stuff. But fortunately, nobody knew what a mentor was, so I was allowed to go and do my own thing. And there is that kind of thing where sometimes we do fly under the radar, but we do so for good. And this is why, as a profession, we're quite hot on looking after each other, because otherwise chaos and anarchy reigns. Actually, we need to go in and help the students that we work for develop the skills to navigate their university systems and to sometimes break their university systems so their university systems get fixed better. And that puts us in a halfway house, which I think is quite radical.
I think indeed you just answered I think indeed you are an anarchist, sir.
Yes, thank you. Only when the university systems are broke. So in my thesis, I talked about the act of mentoring, and I link it into social movements. So things like Extinction Rebellion, the suffragettes. The way they work is, first of all, they start naming what's wrong in the systems. That's what we do as mentors. We sit with students and we say, this is wrong with what is. We name it. And then we frame about what's going to happen next. Actually, this is the issue. How do we fix it? How do you fix it? How do you get your university support systems to fix it? And then, once we've named and framed it, the special job of the mentor is to sit back and sort of fan the flames. So we name, frame and flame. Those are the three things that we go about doing, where we actually create advocates, we create spaces for advocacy, we allow that to happen. And then universities, I mean, I've seen universities now change over the last 14 years or so, and they are more neurodivergent friendly than they used to be. They're not perfect yet, but they're going in the right direction, and that's because of our students advocating for change as proper self-reliant learners. Did that kind of answer the question, or would you hope me to go in a different direction?
No, it's fantastic. I could we could sit here for hours together, but I'm sure there's lots of people who
yes.
would
We'll
like
move
to
around
ask a
questions.
question.
Could I ask you, if you're at the back, we'll holler. If on the recording it hasn't come through, I don't know, I'll put on a squeaky voice or something. Yeah?
I think I can project. Does that go?
Lovely. Thank you, Vicky.
So my question is around the distinction between mentoring and coaching. So I work in entrepreneurship and design, and coaching is the big thing now. It's sweeping higher education in the UK. So I'm interested to hear from your perspective about differing needs across different neurotypes, and really whether coaching is the shiny thing we should all be embracing now.
This is where I'll go to Bridge, because I know you do coaching as well as mentoring, don't you?
We have got some ADHD and autism coaches for employment settings, and I think that's a really interesting question actually, because I think what I would focus on more with the mentoring is very much about the relationship. Okay, and I think we spoke about this before. In a mentor relationship, and I'm sure Lucy agrees here as well, because we work really hard together to make sure students that we support are matched with the right kind of person. And that's really important to foster trust, respect, and make people feel safe and included. Would you agree, Lucy?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that relationship sometimes costs us as mentors a little bit of our own self. Okay. And I think when you look towards a coaching approach, you're looking more at what the person is doing and coaching them to survive in that environment. And I think that is a very different skill. I think I also do study skills, and there's a huge, that definition between the mentor and the study skills, you've got overlap and then you've got huge differences. And it's the recognition of where that student sits within each of those roles and how you as study skills and mentor navigate that support. I think very much in coaching, and I've just dabbled, and Archie has as well, with supported employment training, which again is a very interesting approach. And in the transition mentoring that we do, the coaching is about looking at what that person needs to survive and giving them the tools and the skills in order to achieve that goal. Whereas mentoring is very much about looking at the whole person holistically. I think that is how I would approach that and how I would look at that. Have you any?
We have probably, in the words of coaching, semantic drift going on. So coaching itself, that the first, if you go back in your history, the first coach was actually I'm going to get my universities wrong. It was Cambridge or Oxford. I think it was Cambridge. I could be wrong. But it was a guy called William Hopkins in the 17th century who was their first coach. And it was taken as the whole idea of coaching horses to drag students through their exams. And it was particularly in that time in education where actually students and lecturers didn't talk to each other. They just sort of put each other in the... The whole idea that if you put someone near a set of books, knowledge will rub off on them. Well, actually, students want to go and put themselves near alcohol, so that intoxication rubs off on them. But yes, William Hopkins, when you look at his work, so he actually ended up with a title at Cambridge University, which was he became the senior wrangler maker. The senior wrangler was the head mathematician at the time. And this senior wrangler maker, he was credited with talking long, rambling stories with his students, which actually inspire them to love mathematics and then become really good at it. So even though he was the original coach, I would put him in mentoring kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because
hearing everything you're saying now, I think my perspective is a lot more simplified.
Yeah.
Arguably a layman's term, you could say, because I've not done coaching myself. I've gone through some training, but to me, the difference is pretty much coaching has a goal, mentoring has an adaptation to a person. Would that make sense?
Bang on. So I would even take it further and put it in a 3-part model.
Ooh.
There we go. So teaching is about knowledge. Coaching is about the goal-directed skill achievement.
Like life coach, here's what I want my life to be.
And mentoring is about wisdom. How do you actually take those skills and knowledges and that sort of skill set that you put together, and how you take it forward to make wise and informed decisions to advocate for yourself. Yeah. So I don't know whether that's the official things. I'm getting the thumbs up from Vicky at the back. Yeah, there we go. Just riffing on that one. Moving around question-wise. Hello. You're going to have to holler even more because the microphones don't pick up from the side.
Okay, hi, my name's Katie, I work at the Royal College of Art. This is a question for you, Archie, and I'm hoping I'm not making an assumption, but have you experienced being mentored?
I have, yeah. I have, and it was unfortunately a negative experience for me. The irony being that it's meant to help you. My mentoring consisted of sitting in a cafe in Sainsbury's and having some food, which sounds lovely, but it got me nowhere ever. I tried to, and this kind of maybe why I've led to where I am now. I am self-aware to know what I do and don't need, but I have demand avoidance, and I can witness myself actively allowing things to not happen. So I was very acutely aware, this person I'm seeing, sure, I'm going out and they would even buy me food. It was questionable, really. We talk about my work or anything. It seemed like we got stuck in the hello, nice to meet you phase indefinitely. I cut that relationship off because the militant part of me said, this isn't what you need, this isn't functioning, I asked for a mentor. But what I will say is I felt very guilty, and I felt I was, again, in my life, pushing away support, but I could see the support wasn't support. So that was one instance. I did have another instance, though.
I think just to add to that, and I think that's one of the unique things that Lucy and I both realised in our journeys as mentors, that if you're working externally from the university, I don't know how it is within a university, is that if you have the right qualifications and you tick a box of qualifications, you are appointed by an agency, you may never meet that person that's appointed you, and then you're just matched with a student.
Yeah,
What
I didn't
is that? It doesn't work. And I think you had support that came from one of those agencies, because I do know the history there. And I think this is why Lucy and I got our heads together and said, what's going on? It's not, we have so many students that we've supported that have had such horrific experiences. And if you go through one mentor, it doesn't work. Second mentor, not quite sure. Third mentor, I'm not going to bother, I'll just keep going. It's difficult. And so it's really important that you know your student, you get time to spend with your student, and you know the mentor that's going to work.
So if you're in the commissioning role yourself, may I commend to you the Neurodivergent-Led groups. People like Bridge, people like Spectrum First, they're the ones that have the lived experience and also the humility to say, actually, today I'm not the right mentor. And that, if you're a mentor yourself, may I commend, since we're going into the first sort of September, the first few discussions you should have are things like, what's the point in university? And then you should then go on to say, what's the point in having me as your mentor? And then maybe having 5 minutes teaching your mentors how to tell you to fuck off. And that's really important, actually having that voice where a mentor you trust and you can say, go away if you need to. It's one of those really open ways we do it. And as mentors, it puts us in a bind. We work quite often on 0-hour contracts. And so having the right mentoring choice can sometimes, doing the right thing means that we don't get that hour of work for that term or year. But this is why I think the justice inherent in the neurodivergent-led groups, that kind of mediates that, because they'll say, no, I'm going to take one for the team, but we'll find other people to mentor for me, and we'll be able to shift people around so that you get the right mentor.
Yeah. And that's really important. And Lucy and I'll both sit here and say we've both had experiences where somebody's actually said,
me too.
I don't want that person. Haven't we, Lucy?
Absolutely.
And sometimes that hits hard. But sometimes you go, yeah, actually.
But
That's right.
just listening to your experience, I mean, it's amazing you had the strength to make that decision to sort of end that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm wondering when there's a lot of other people out there that might just carry on and
absolutely.
recognise that this isn't what mentorship should be.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a concern, isn't it?
Nobody knows what mentorship should be. I did a PhD and I was still guessing half the time.
Yeah.
When it comes to the mentoring aspect, that didn't work for me, and it kind of did push me back. I did get another mentor very briefly who did do a bit better with me, and they insisted I bring my laptop in to do work, but that, unfortunately, they had to go elsewhere. It wasn't until, and I say this with full transparency, the only mentor I had that did help me was with Bridge. Prior to me working for Bridge, it was kind of part of an organic growth thing for me, and why I kind of established a bit of a working relationship already. Somebody that I didn't know at Bridge was assigned to me, and they helped me go through everything to do with me, and we built a document about my mind. With me, and then they asked me questions like, is that helpful? And do you think this is useful to you? And I am tempted to name drop, but I feel like maybe they won't want that. But they did a very good job.
If they're awesome, shout their name, and if they don't want to, we'll take it out later.
It's Sarah King.
If you listen to the Neuromentoring podcast, Sarah is on the podcast at one point.
Oh, is she?
Yes, she is. She does an episode with us.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely amazing. So we'll get Sarah back on again.
Yeah, Sarah's great. She's
Sarah
wonderful.
rocks.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky to have known a few of the Bridge folk over the years. I'm personally very, very fond of them as a group. Other neurodivergent-led groups do apply.
Yeah.
So if you're out there, if you're doing those kind of things. We have more questions, if you would.
Hi, I just have a question, as I'm sure many of you know that like students with ADHD are now being allocated autism mentors. I am a specialist mental health and autism mentor, but I'm quite curious about this because there's obviously a lot of co-occurrence. So I think if the student is ADHD, that might be quite helpful. But I'm just kind of curious about your perspective of, is that helpful?
I actually wrote some papers on neurodivergent ways of staying focused. Strategy, I hate the word strategies, it's too business school. But I love the word workarounds, where we sort of become more fluid for things. And we're looking at workarounds done by, we had equal quarters in our sample, autistic, ADHD, or ADHD, and the predominant neurotype. The predominant neurotype unfortunately got labelled in the office as the neuro-boring because they came up with some of the most tedious, how do you get stuff focused? Or just do it. Sod off. It's not right. But our neurodivergent folk actually gave us far more detail about how to stay focused. The interesting thing is the overlap of the workarounds was huge. Almost every single workaround was done by autistic folk or ADHD folk. Sometimes it changed a little bit, like, so the autistic music of choice to focus to was lo-fi, while the ADHDers went for more punk and ska. So, yeah, fair enough. But apart from that, very little, there were still earplugs on, let's hammer out these essay kind of things. The only one that there wasn't in any of the other groups was all ADHD, which was I found that smell distracting. which seem to be, oh, well, we've got the or ADHDers in here. They get it. Is where you get that smell and suddenly you can't focus anymore. It takes away. It's almost as if one single smell takes up too much or a single train of information. And so you don't have that beautiful multi-information thing going on in your head, which, the usual smell of the entire world does. So just a hunch out there. But really, really fascinating stuff. Most of the workarounds are fairly universal. The second bit is the overlap is huge. I've just been recruiting for a sort of online survey where I needed to recruit 420 ADHD folk to find only 66 that were ADHD without autistic traits. So actually the overlap itself is huge, but the research on all ADHD is still fairly new. So watch this space. I think it'll work.
Yeah, that's great. I think, sorry, I should have been more specific. I think I was more thinking, I think I've had students, for example, that they have ADHD, but they're not identified autistic, whether they are autistic or not. And I think that it's a barrier for them to access the mentoring because they feel as if that they're not being given something that is for them. I should have asked it differently, but I agree that it does because so much overlap. But I think, and I've just had a few students coming through on the books, and you have the first meeting, and as you say, the usual stuff, and then they're like, "I'm not autistic," and you're like, "Okay, that's
To which the answer is, hello, I'm Brian. I'm your neurodiversity mentor, and I'm neurodivergent as well," which is how we sort of lean into it. So rather than splicing things up, we can work towards solidarity. And that's a scary thing. Again, I'm going to be Brenda the anarchist here. I'm a collectivist. Actually, if we get our neurodivergent folk working together and we rebrand ourselves as neurodivergent mentoring, of course on paperwork we will tick off the autism plus ADHD books because we like getting paid, and the government is always about 4 years late. So there is that stuff. I commend rebranding as an exercise.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was leaning towards.
I think it's certainly better, and I was so heartened when that change happened on the criteria, because previously when all the ADHD diagnoses were falling in the mental health box, it was difficult to really sort of challenge that, and a lot of the students that I worked with that had the ADHD diagnosis wanted to be with autism neurodivergent people rather than a mental health.
It helps you pick what it helps you pick and understand what you need. And I think about, so it's not relevant to me now. I realised why it wasn't going to work for me, but there's a lot of studies and very clear evidence that CBT doesn't work for people that have certain neurodivergent things going on.
Oh, is black and white thinking evil all of a sudden? Fuck off. Excuse me, I'll be sweary again.
Well, it's what's helped me, and this is bizarre, and this isn't me preaching, this is just something that I culturally had a little stumble upon, but I thought, oh, what's this? Or Buddhism. And I thought, what's this? And it helped me a lot with mindfulness. And I found out that there's something called DBT, dialectical behavioural therapy, which is a version of CBT that takes, weirdly, Buddhist values, and it works for people with, a lot of the time, UPD, BPD, and people.
So this is where I took in a previous life. I was an RE teacher. I've got awards for teaching Buddhism. It's brilliant. The interesting thing with dialectical stuff, and this is just tangent of the side, is that it takes suffering as part of the thing. CBT is, stuff happens, you look after your own brain, you can change your own thoughts. DBT talks properly about suffering and how we don't let it have its hold upon us. And that's how we can move potentially past trauma. That's why some of the greater wisdoms that we can find in all the world's faiths are actually really, really helpful, and how we bring them to mentoring itself. St. Teresa of Avila, completely different thing. I was reading some of her works. She was so ADHD, it's incredible. And it kind of is, if you go back to the medieval period, neurodivergence and sainthood. I mean, career path.
Okay, well, I'm on the now, folks.
There we go. Lucy, have you anything to say about or ADHD before we move on?
I think I talked about earlier, I was very lucky when I did my master's degree. My mentor, I came to them, the mental health student, but she also was an autism mentor, which then gave me access just answering the previous question, to an ADHD diagnosis, signposted to the right places. But I think that to add to what Amanda had said, the change for our students and other students we work with, all of them say, a lot of our feedback is correct. I love that my mentor is autistic. I love that my mentor has ADHD. There's a different layer of understanding and rapport that you build quite organically.
And also there is a fundamental difference between mental health mentoring and neurodiversity mentoring. The core of mental health mentoring is to ensure there isn't a relapse of the mental health issue. Yeah. Why would we try to stop an autistic relapse? Doesn't even make sense as a way forward. But actually, for the neurodiversity movement, there is something about finding your full being. There's something about the unpacking of yourself, the unfolding of yourself that happens at university that allows you, that is you, to shine forth. Questions. Question from the front.
Well, it's sort of a question. I'm kind of interested in is this kind of wonderful thing that's offered to students when they come to university. But I'm really interested in what happens beforehand as well. And this kind of huge gap, because we're talking about self-advocacy and, you know, to me, the question is, why are students not already able to advocate a little bit for themselves? And, you know, also why in schools is there this expectation that young people should be able to advocate for themselves? Yeah. And you're obviously really kind of looking at it in a more nuanced way.
Frontal lobe.
I think...
Still developing. Oh, yeah. Frontal lobe still developing.
And can I pick up on that as well? Is that it is a huge concern. And I think that more so, it's a huge concern going out of university. And Lucy has been working on the OTAS programme that we're trying to develop and look at, because there are so many young autistic people out of school because they cannot cope with the environment. And unfortunately, in my opinion, and it's a personal opinion, schools have not quite grasped how they need to change and how they need to be inclusive and be more accommodating. I'm not saying that across all schools, you know, everybody's different. And I think, you know, also, I think the support that's available in universities, I mean, if this child has got an EHCP, suddenly when we come to DSA support, it goes out the window. Boom! Not, you know, doesn't matter. And they may well have been well supported in school. Quite often I find it's the students that sit on the edge, and in my 37 years experience, I'd quite like to not tell you this time, it always has been those students that sit on the edge, the quiet ones, the ones that don't really make a fuss, that sit at the back, that don't necessarily know what support is available, that don't necessarily know how to access the support that's available, that hasn't got a warrior parent, you know, and we know these warrior parents are out there that have got great, you know, understanding of what's going on. And these are the people that are missing the loop. Schools do not educate about what's available for our neurodivergent community going forward through transitions. Lucy and I have just had funding for transition mentoring that was aimed to bridge that gap.
Good name.
From there, and more so going into employment, because through that programme we have found parents coming to us saying, help. And also dads coming to us saying, I don't understand my child. You know, help, you know, so there's a lot going on. And employment as well, that transition. I know, Archie, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, I've got a lot that's building up my head, so.
Archie, in the transition from education, unfortunately, Archie did not complete the university life.
And there's more to it as well.
There's more to it than that, yeah.
I had a brain aneurysm. So, I had a brain aneurysm. Just before I get into that, because I need to say, I feel like, to answer your question directly, and it's a sad answer, and it does make me feel sad because it harkens back to things that go on in my mind as well. I think autistic people, neurodivergent people, there's a lot going on in there, and I think there's an awful lot of survival And survival is not about advocacy. Survival is sometimes about, I'm going to get through this, and then I get home and I get to play on my PlayStation. And then it's, I go to work, I go to school, I'm going to get through this, and then I'm going to talk to my friends later. The brain power, the bandwidth, is not spent on the future, is not spent on how to fix the problem, it's spent on not drowning. Because schools do not fundamentally, and I'd like to think they've changed since I was there. I mean, I'm relatively young. I'm scared to say I'm approaching 30. But when I was in school, as far as I'm aware, there's no form of, let's actually work out how these people work. Let's actually work out, the students, you know. There was, I remember in primary school, there was somebody who had Down syndrome. And Down syndrome is something that most people are able to tell. And it affects a lot of people. But that there are more invisible things, you know. Autism doesn't really present itself in some people till a lot later, I think. I think some children are obvious, but...
On that one, if you do work in schools, can I commend the LEANS project to you, which comes from Edinburgh University. It is a primary school curriculum where you get 7 units where the entire class learns about neurodiversity, and in the sort of cartoons that they use, that you can actually see the teacher go on a journey, and that's the best part. So LEANS, it must be about 2 years in now. I do commend it to you if you work in the sector, because that is going to the
That's
root.
great.
It really is. Because it's not about just teachers learning, it's about having an entire class so that it's like super being yourself.
Exactly. I think on a podcast recently that I did with somebody called Ebony, she's a speech and language therapist in training. She's
She qualifies in January.
She's pretty good. But she expressed to me something I'd never known, is that when people are diagnosed with neurodivergences when they're younger, it's not something they own, it's something they are. But when you find out later, it's my autism, it's my ADHD. So you don't say, I'm this, you say my ADHD. And I think one of the fundamental problems with society is we like to put things in boxes, and people are people, individuals. And you can't just put a person in a box. But we're so used to saying ADHD, dyslexia, and all these lists that we kind of forget, hang on a minute, this is a person and they're very unique. And that is sadly not super accessible because of how many people, the teachers we have and mentors to students.
And that's why I'm so glad that the mentoring is available. But the gatekeeping of mentoring to neurodivergent folks sometimes just makes me think, where's the line? Actually, if you need mentoring, you need mentoring. Yeah, throw it. Lucy, before we go anywhere, do you have a wise thought to share with us? And I'll go around to Amanda, and I'll go around to Archie too. And then I'll skip myself because I'm sneaky. There we go. A wise thought. If there's something you could tell mentors, what would be your wise thought that is your wise thought for today?
As an ADHD person, as an autistic ADHD mentor, holisticity. We actually do an episode on there.
Yeah, well, I can't say the word holisticity at any point. Holisticity ends up saying holisticity halfway through. Yeah.
But holisticity, that's at the core driver, positionality. You're on the right track.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Holisticity, first bit of wisdom. Amanda.
I'm not good on wisdom. All I keep thinking is just be you and be true and be there.
I believe it's is it Gene Wilder that was Willy Wonka?
Yes. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I like this one.
I'll do it in the best tune I can, but a little nonsense now and then is relished by the wisest man.
That's the one.
I love that.
There's also no earthly way of knowing which direction we are going. But that's basically our podcast through and through. Absolutely. I'm going to wrap it up with, I think when it comes to wisdom, there are times where you don't have the wisdom. And you can be either humble enough to say that you don't know how to have the wisdom, or you can just sit there and pretend and look like Yoda. And if you look like Yoda, sometimes people come out with their own wisdom, and that's almost more important. The impersonification of wisdom. Well, we're not perfect, but sometimes we pretend and something magical happens. happens. So I would like to thank everyone here. Please give yourselves a huge round of applause. I would like to thank Lucy. Thank you, Lucy. I'd like to thank Amanda, and I'd like to thank Archie. We've been podcasting. We always finish this by saying, be brilliant.